Payment Pulse, a podcast by Clearent by Xplor, a leading full-service payments provider. Welcome to Payment Pulse, a podcast by Clearent by Xplor, where we aim to simplify and humanize the complex world of payments. I'm Steve, and as always, I'm here with my co-host Max. How you doing today, man?
I'm good, Steve. It's a beautiful day out, and we're talking about payments. It's gonna be a good one. How are you?
Good, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely sick of this cold, ready to move on to a nicer weather. But yeah, I'm excited to jump into it. And so today's episode is, another segment of our micro series where we're breaking down consumer spending behaviors. The broader topic is how social influences shape consumer spending behavior. We're going to take a look at the psychological and cultural factors that drive purchasing decisions, whether that's, peer pressure, social norms, or the latest viral trends. Consumers rarely make decisions, in isolation. There's always an outside factor that is contributing to that decision. And understanding these social factors can help businesses optimize, their checkout experience, loyalty programs, payment options, and all with the goal of, ultimately driving more business for them. So
Yeah, it's gonna be an awesome one, Steve. So, as the resident marketing guy on this podcast, we're gonna have you kind of be our subject matter expert today. I'll ask the questions and hopefully learn a lot along the way. So let's start with the basics. We're talking about the power of social proof in payments. We're talking about writ large the influence of social influences on how we spend money and where we spend money and with what we spend money. And so let's start with the basics. What underpins social pressures associated with how we pay for things?
what really underpins all of this is the concept of social proof, which is the idea that people look to others when making purchasing decisions. If you see your friends or influencers or a majority of people choosing a particular product, service, or payment method, they're more likely to do the same. And we'll dive more into it, but obviously in the world of social media and access to phones and, the internet, basically, it's a lot easier and there's a much greater influence.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess you see it everywhere, right? I'm thinking from my own experience. I take the lead from what people say on online reviews or from social media or friends and family. So, in terms of payment methods, I think of like Apple Pay and how I was definitely skeptical when early on. It's like that doesn't feel safe versus just tapping my credit card. But now I hardly take my wallet out of the house when I know I'm just going down the road to the grocery store. So certainly feel that one.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Social proof can push consumers towards decisions that they might not have made otherwise, especially when combined with urgency, exclusivity. And again, social media plays a huge role here with platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, really amplifying trends and influencing those decisions in real time. A product going viral it's so common. You see it like literally once a week, it feels like. But a product going viral on social media because a celebrity was using it, it can really drive a huge demand literally overnight within a matter of hours even. Because people are seeing that and they're wanting to get in on that action as well. And, ultimately it's the influence of, the people that we see value in or we see, taking actions on various products that ultimately they drive that impulsive spending behavior.
No, 100%. And, outside of that, just social proof, it feels like there's this other influence that's playing on us. And that is kind of this price of luxury, and like the kind of the feeling that you get when you kind of get to when you're able to spend on luxury. Can you kind of talk about how that plays into the psychology of consumer decision making?
Yeah, absolutely. Social comparison and status spending is a major influence. Consumers don't just buy products; they buy status, they buy a lifestyle, and luxury brands really, they really thrive on this. That's a concept that applies to various spending behaviors. It's not just retail stores and the Gucci, the Louis, that kind of thing. There's influence in luxury in all aspects.
Yeah, and in that regard, I think of grocery store spending. Just to my earlier point, when you have the decision of going down to Whole Foods versus going to, an Aldi or a very, a smaller shop, being able to walk out of that Whole Foods with a Whole Foods bag resonates, with uh, that kind of whole idea that you just said of like, I like to have that Whole Foods bag, and tell people that, hey, I can afford to pay at Whole Foods, which easily is maybe 20% more expensive on the same goods I might be buying at the discount store down the street. Um, so, like, tell me a bit more about, this kind of signal status that we play maybe inherently with these decisions, and um, how does that come into play?
Yeah, I mean, look at your friend groups, right? Like friend groups is a huge aspect. It's not just the celebrities, but the people around you influence those decisions as well. And so, using the Whole Foods example, just because it's relevant, like if your friends are shopping at Whole Foods, there's a higher chance that you're going to end up shopping at Whole Foods as well, and wanting to feel on the same level as the people that you're closest with.
Yeah, yeah, and do you think like it's something to take into consideration for businesses, as it pertains to the payment methods that they're using? So, for example, Whole Foods also has. Let's step away from the Whole Foods example and just kind of talk about a generic grocery store. You're owning a small grocery store in a you know medium-sized city. What do you have to kind of consider, in terms of what payment methods you're paying with, and how do consumers think about what credit card or debit card or rewards program they're going to use to pay with? What's going on there?
Yeah. Again, it goes back to status and I think essentially like self-inflation, right? But people are more likely to use a premium credit card, think an Amex Platinum where, the metal card and you drop it on the table and you feel, flashy and fancy. And hopefully, most people are using those cards effectively, but it is a status symbol, right? And, I can even say in my friend groups, it's things that we talk about and we make jokes, but the jokes tend to be, kind of a relevant trend in the world and your friend groups, your social settings, and the act of paying with a premium card is really reinforcing the perception of wealth and exclusivity.
Yeah, so it's just, I think definitely there's a message there that if you are a small business, in order to like align yourself with the trends in consumer psychology and this kind of social comparison game that we all play, you have to make sure that you're kind of offering the ability to pay for, or the ability to pay with premium credit cards, the ability to pay with Cash App or buy now pay, some maybe a buy now pay later type of situation, and that we're going to see these trends pick up as new generations come up, and take on different types of payment, purchasing uses, right, and technologies. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves, because, for example, I've been using, I actually just started using Cash App or Venmo and Cash App, and kind of the peer-to-peer payment styles a bit more around San Francisco, just because I'll get better deals on certain items than if I pay with my credit card. So similar to how you see kind of cash and card prices at very in a dual pricing system, you start to see kind of a Venmo price and a card price. So definitely like an interesting element there. Let's go to this kind of, something you kind of touched on, was this kind of fear of missing out, right? Like you want to be able to like do the impulse buying. You want to be able to like you know spend on what you want to spend. Tell me a little bit more about what your what a business has to kind of keep in mind as it pertains to, um, tapping into that feeling that consumers have around FOMO.
Yeah, I mean it's strategies that have got me in the past, but it's been used by marketers and sales for years. With limited time offers, flash sales, scarcity tactics, and that really applies to the fear of missing out. And think like on somebody's website when they're running low on stock, you can see maybe two left in stock. it all triggers an impulse spending behavior. And when consumers think that they might miss out on that deal, they're more likely to act quickly. And so that urgency created by FOMO can make people spend impulsively, and it's oftentimes without really considering if they actually need the product or not. It's an emotional response.
Yeah. And to that emotional response, what are some of the payment technologies that you're seeing that have appeared to kind of, you know, basically align with that trend?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, and if you haven't listened, go check it out. But buy now, pay later, like that's a really big one for this, and it really kind of reinforces that impulse decision because it makes it a lot easier for a consumer to go to a website after, maybe they saw it was running low on stock, and then they can spread out their payments over, 4 weeks, longer than that if they need to. But, that's really a great example of, you know, how to capitalize essentially on the psychological spending habits. Yeah, it spreads out that payment. And again, it's just ultimately making it easier for somebody to complete that impulse spend.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. Um, let's go to one other influence. Look, I think that's a great turning point in the conversation. We've just spoken for about 10 minutes about like how are we as humans impulse. How are we making these decisions from a psychological and like emotional level, and what are some of the and we've talked a lot about like the it seems like this episode is kind of going in the direction of saying, hey, there's all these things that like make us want to buy more, and yet that's like kind of happened throughout history, like wherever we've gone, like humans are humans regardless if it was hundreds of years ago or if it was yesterday. But one thing that to me seems like much different today than it was when maybe our parents were our age is social media and the influence that social media has had on uh, buying decisions. And that's not just online, but you know the conscious or subconscious decisions that we're making in person as well. It feels hard to miss. So tell me a little bit about how the influence of TikTok or Instagram or YouTube has changed how we have purchased.
Yeah, I mean, you can never forget social media, especially in this day and age with product discovery. It's made it so easy to see new products. It's really embedded in our daily content consumption, and so whether it's influencer endorsements, the TikTok made me buy it trend, if you've seen that, live shopping events, which is really fascinating to me. Social platforms are really driving enormous amounts of consumer spending at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you know it feels like one viral video or influencer recommendation can really lead to a product selling out overnight. And uh, I'm not one to say like I've gone on a social media cleanse over the last few months, but I still feel the gravitational pull to at least kind of shop and eat and consume in a certain way, because I think it's been now integrated over many years of how somebody my age should, what I should eat, what I should, where I should vacation, where I should live. And it is crazy how to our point earlier, like how that trickles down not just to like what I'm purchasing, but what I'm purchasing with, and what I look out for in terms of like the dynamics of a store. So yeah, it's definitely palpable.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't think, people are necessarily going to Instagram or TikTok to actually shop. And so I feel like a lot of times it's a subconscious thing where you don't know until you see it, and then you see it, and it's, you kind of have to pull the trigger. But yeah, social, like I said, it's really driven the discovery of new products, but they're also doing things with different payment technologies, and we can't forget like how far payment integration has really evolved. And so now social media platforms are now embedding payment solutions directly into the ecosystem, making it even easier. They don't even have to leave the app. Again, think TikTok. Instagram kind of has their own version of it as well with just autofill and really easy to buy products just embedded right into the platform.
100%. And it's that's like a whole new episode of conversation to talk about how merchants and maybe ISOs or ISVs um, evolve their offerings online. I have a feeling that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see every merchant everywhere have an online presence somehow, and adopt kind of faster, more online rails for developing their storefront. But that's a different episode. Um, but it's definitely compelling. So let's zoom out just a bit more, and kind of talk about the implications of these kind of spending norms and kind of what are the global implications for payments. Um, Social influence isn't just about what's trending. It's also like deeply tied to culture. Uh, what happens in the U.S. might be a trend and might influence the rest of the world, but you go to the UK, you go to the EU, they act very differently. Take an example here, like we in the US spend much more on par with our credit cards versus the UK, and the EU, which is still predominantly a debit card or direct debit kind of culture. Tell me a little bit about more, like from your point of view in the marketing and like a social, like consumer level decision making framework and like social norm framework. What are some of those trends shaping behavior?
Yeah, culture is a big one. And it's not just, from country to country, it's even within the US. Now, within the US, the differences are maybe a little less in terms of the differences between the US and the UK. But in some countries, cash is still king. Again, relating to what I just said, there are likely still some areas in the US that favor cash. So, while other countries and cities have fully embraced digital wallets, in collectivist cultures, spending is often influenced by family obligations. While in individualistic cultures, it's a lot more about self-expression, and that again ties back to all of the things that we just said above, especially in the U.S. You see a lot of these um, influential spending habits based on friends, celebrities, status, and so the differences with culture is something you really do have to consider, even within the United States, but especially when you're thinking on a global scale as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I guess the takeaway is somewhat that like for merchants, for software providers, expanding into new markets, whether it be like Canada and Mexico, or across the pond, um, or into new markets in Asia or Africa, you're talking about like adjusting to local spending behaviors and how your payment technology interropes with those behaviors is very crucial.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, adapting to cultural preferences can, it's going to enhance that customer trust and it's going to drive more conversions. And it's not just culturally too, right? Like all the things that we just mentioned, you got to think about the product that you sell, what type of brand you want to portray, and who your customers are and how they spend money. So that last point really is through and through with all the points above.
Yeah, and look again, we could go. This is a whole podcast episode about another one all on its own, but we could talk at length about was it the chicken and the egg problem of do you adjust, do you adapt to a culture's spending behaviors, or do you build something that changes that behavior? And we'll never really know. I mean, that again, we'll save that for another time. But we'll bring some product people on because it might be better than just having the marketing and the finance guy in the room. So Steve, let's wrap it up. And let's tie it back to payments. It seems like there's a lot of interconnectedness in terms of all these points we made. Do you mind just giving us a brief takeaway of what we spoke about today?
Yeah, I would say the biggest takeaway is, consumer spending in 2025, especially, and we've seen the lead up to this, and it's only going to continue, but it's deeply social, whether it's social proof, status spending, FOMO driven urgency, social media influence, or cultural norms. businesses do really need to take into consideration their payment strategies and tailor it to to those influencing factors. And that really means optimizing your checkout experiences, using behavioral insights and data to really drive engagement, and ensuring that payment options align with the consumer expectations.
100%. 100%. It's pretty clear when businesses understand these social influences. And those are usually the businesses that convert customers and keep people loyal to their brand. So, uh, you know, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. So that was great. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Happy to be the subject matter expert in this case today, I guess. But yeah,
Huge.
that's it for today's episode of Payment Pulse. We really want to know what you guys think about these social influences. Is it something that you're considering as a business owner, whether you're a merchant, a software provider? We really want to hear, what you guys have to think about this. And have any of these, trends influenced you personally? I know I can speak for myself that they absolutely have. And maybe whether you know it or not, they definitely have an influence to a degree. But yeah, if you guys found this valuable, please make sure to check us out at Clearent.com. We are a full service payments provider. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got new episodes coming out frequently here. And yeah, really appreciate the time today, Max. And we'll see y'all next week.